Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're building in our Minecraft world while I walk you through some stories that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about trust. If you're here for the chaos, the betrayal, and maybe a little bit of satisfaction when the truth finally comes out, you're in the right place. Before we get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's been showing up, commenting, and supporting the channel. Seriously, thank you. It means more than you know. So, tonight's collection starts with someone who thought one act of kindness would make a difference. They had no idea that helping a stranger would turn into a nightmare that cost them everything. Sometimes the road to hell really is paved with good intentions, and this person learned that lesson the hardest way possible. So let's dive in because this one gets dark fast. I was just trying to be a decent person. That's all it was supposed to be. It was pouring rain, the kind where you can barely see 10 feet in front of you, and I was coming out of the grocery store when I saw her. This elderly woman, maybe 75, 80 years old, struggling to load bags into her car. Her hands were shaking, the bags were soaked through, and she looked like she was about 2 seconds away from losing her grip on everything. So I did what I thought anyone would do. I walked over and asked if she needed help. She looked so relieved, told me her car was in the shop and she'd taken a rideshare to the store, but the driver had just dropped her off without helping. She was trying to figure out how to get everything home in one piece. I offered her a ride, simple as that. She hesitated for a second, probably because, stranger danger. But I showed her my work badge, told her I wasn't in a rush, and she finally said yes. The drive was maybe 10 minutes. We made small talk. She told me about her garden, her grandkids, how her son was always too busy to help her with errands. Sweet lady. When we got to her house, I helped her carry the bags to the porch. She invited me in for tea, said it was the least she could do. I politely declined. I had work in the morning, and honestly, I just wanted to get home and dry off, but I gave her my number and told her if she ever needed help again, she could call me. She thanked me about 5 times, and I left. I felt good about it, like I'd actually done something nice for once, helped someone who needed it. No ulterior motive, no expectation of anything in return, just a good deed. 2 days later, I was at work when 2 police officers walked into my office. I thought it was a joke at first, like maybe someone had called in a prank or something, but their faces were dead serious. They asked me to step outside, said they needed to ask me some questions. My coworkers were staring, my boss was standing in the doorway looking confused. I had no idea what was happening. They asked me if I knew a woman named Margaret. I said yes, I'd helped her with groceries a couple days ago. They asked if I'd been inside her house. I said no, I'd only gone as far as the porch. Then they told me why they were there. Apparently, jewelry had gone missing from her house that same afternoon. Expensive stuff, family heirlooms, and her son had convinced her that I must have taken it. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I couldn't process it. I told them I never even went inside. I told them about the security footage from the grocery store, the timestamps, everything. They said they'd look into it, but in the meantime, I needed to come down to the station and give a formal statement. That's when everything unraveled. My employer put me on administrative leave while the investigation was ongoing. They said it was protocol, that they couldn't have someone under police scrutiny representing the company. I understood the logic, but it didn't make it hurt any less. I'd worked there for 6 years. 6 years of clean performance reviews, promotions, good relationships with everyone. And now I was being treated like a criminal because I helped an old lady with her groceries. But that wasn't even the worst part. My girlfriend found out. I tried to explain it to her calmly, told her it was all a misunderstanding, that I hadn't done anything wrong. She listened, nodded, and then said she needed time to think. 2 days later, she broke up with me, said she couldn't be with someone who made choices like that. I asked her what that meant. She said giving my number to a stranger, getting involved in someone else's life, putting myself in a situation where I could be accused of something. She said it showed poor judgment, that she couldn't trust my decision-making. I was flawed. This was the same person who told me a month earlier that she loved how kind I was, how I always went out of my way to help people, and now that kindness was apparently a character flaw. Then the neighbors started whispering. I'd see them in the hallway, in the parking lot, and they'd go quiet when I walked by. A couple of them stopped making eye contact. I didn't understand why until someone showed me the Facebook post. Margaret's son had posted about me in every local community group he could find. He didn't use my full name, but he described me in enough detail that anyone who knew me would recognize it. He called me a predator, said I was targeting elderly people, gaining their trust and robbing them. He posted a warning telling people to watch out for men offering unsolicited help. He made me sound like a career criminal. The comments were brutal. People shared the post. Some said they'd seen me around and always thought I looked suspicious. Others said they'd keep an eye out and call the police if they saw me near any seniors. My phone started getting random calls from blocked numbers, people leaving voicemails calling me a thief, a scumbag. Worse. This is where patience finally snapped. I contacted a lawyer. He told me I could sue for defamation, but it would be expensive and time-consuming, and even if I won, the damage to my reputation was already done. He suggested I wait for the police investigation to clear me, and then decide. So I waited, and waited. 3 weeks of absolute hell. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go to my usual coffee shop without people staring. I stopped going to the gym because someone had recognized me from the Facebook post and made a scene. My own family started asking questions, saying things like, "We know you didn't do it, but why did you put yourself in that situation?" As if helping someone was a crime in itself. Then, finally, the call came. The police had arrested someone, Margaret's actual caregiver. Turned out she'd been stealing from Margaret for months. Small things at first, then bigger items. She'd taken the jewelry the same day I'd helped with the groceries and had tried to pawn it 2 towns over. She confessed to everything. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd get an apology, my job back, my life back. But that's not how it works, apparently. The police cleared me officially, but my employer didn't reinstate me. They said the optics were bad, that even though I was innocent, the situation had created too much controversy, and they couldn't afford the distraction. They offered me 2 weeks severance and a neutral reference. That was it. 6 years, gone. Margaret's son never apologized. He took down the Facebook posts, but he never issued a retraction, never admitted he was wrong, never acknowledged that he'd destroyed my life over an assumption. When I tried to reach out to Margaret herself, her son blocked my number. I never got to hear from her again. The landlord decided not to renew my lease, said it wasn't personal, just that they'd received complaints from other tenants and felt it was better for everyone if I moved on. I packed up my entire life and moved to a different part of the city where no one knew my face. You almost have to admire the audacity of people who ruin your life and then just walk away like nothing happened. I lost my job, I lost my girlfriend, I lost my apartment, I lost my reputation, all because I stopped to help someone carry groceries in the rain. And the only lesson I learned from it is that no good deed goes unpunished when someone needs a scapegoat. People don't care about the truth. They care about the story. And once the story is out there, it doesn't matter if it's false. The damage is done. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Trust me, the next story might hit even closer to home. So there I was, jobless, homeless, reputation destroyed, all because I stopped to help someone carry groceries. But here's the thing about rock bottom. You start noticing patterns you missed before, like how quickly people believe the worst about you, how fragile trust really is, how one person's lie can become everyone's truth if it's loud enough. I'm rebuilding now. Different job, different apartment, different city. I don't help strangers anymore. I don't give out my number. I keep my head down and mind my own business. Some people might call that cynical. I call it survival, because I learned the hard way that kindness doesn't protect you. Documentation does. Witnesses do. Distance does. And every time I see someone struggling with groceries in the rain, I keep walking. Speaking of patterns you don't see coming, the next person thought they had everything figured out in their relationship. They were so confident, so certain, until one accusation flipped the entire script. The first sign something was wrong was when she started asking where I'd been. Not in a curious way, in an accusatory way, like she already had an answer in her head and was just waiting for me to confirm it. I'd come home from work and she'd immediately start with the questions. Why was I late? Who was I with? Did I stop anywhere? It felt like an interrogation. I tried to laugh it off at first, told her I was just stuck in traffic or had to finish something at the office. Normal stuff. But she wasn't buying it. Then came the perfume comments. She'd lean in when I walked through the door, sniff my shirt, and say things like, "You smell different." I worked in an office with 12 other people. Half of them wore perfume. I told her that. She'd just give me this look like I was lying straight to her face. It escalated fast. She started checking my phone when I was in the shower. I'd come out and see it face down in a slightly different spot than where I'd left it. She'd go through my messages, my emails, my call log. I confronted her about it once and she turned it around on me, saying if I had nothing to hide, why did I care? Classic deflection, but I didn't see it at the time. I thought she was just insecure. Maybe something from a past relationship was bleeding into ours. I tried to be patient, tried to reassure her. I'd text her throughout the day, send her pictures of my desk, my coworkers, my lunch, anything to prove I wasn't doing what she was accusing me of. It didn't help. If anything, it made her more paranoid. And here's where it gets absurd. We were at her parents' house for dinner. Her mom had made this whole spread. Her dad was asking me about work. Everything was fine. Until dessert. Out of nowhere, she looked at me across the table and said, "So are you going to tell them, or should I?" I had no idea what she was talking about. I asked her what she meant. She said, "About the cheating." The room went silent. Her parents stared at me. I stared at her. I genuinely thought she was joking, like it was some weird bit she was doing. But her face was dead serious. She told her parents I'd been cheating on her for months, that I'd been lying about working late, that I'd been seeing someone else, that she'd found evidence. I asked her what evidence. She said she didn't need to prove anything, that she just knew. Her mum looked horrified. Her dad looked like he wanted to throw me out. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that none of it was true, but she just kept talking over me, adding details, painting this whole picture of me as some serial cheater. I stood up and left, didn't even say goodbye. I was humiliated, angry, confused. I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to process what had just happened, and that's when it hit me. The accusations, the paranoia, the constant projection, something felt off. That's when everything unraveled. I went home and pulled up our phone records. We were on a shared plan, so I had access to everything. Texts, calls, data usage, all of it. I started scrolling through her activity from the past few months. And there it was. Hundreds of texts to a number I didn't recognize. Not just a few here and there. Daily, multiple times a day. Late at night, early in the morning. Constant communication. I didn't jump to conclusions right away. I needed to be sure. So I did what any rational person would do. I called the number. A guy answered. I asked who he was. He said his name was Derek and asked who I was. I told him I was calling from my girlfriend's phone records and wanted to know why they'd been texting so much. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Wait, girlfriend?" She told me she was single. And suddenly the whole plan fell apart. We stayed on the phone for about 30 minutes. He told me everything. They'd met at the gym about 4 months ago. She'd approached him, flirted, gave him her number. They'd been seeing each other ever since, going on dates, spending weekends together, the whole thing. He had no idea I existed. She told him she lived alone, that she was focusing on herself after a bad breakup, that she wasn't looking for anything serious but liked spending time with him. He was just as blindsided as I was. He thought they were casually dating. Turns out she'd been running 2 full relationships at the same time, keeping us both on the line, seeing which one would work out better, like we were options on a menu. I asked him if he wanted to meet up. He said yes. We met at a coffee shop the next day. It would have been awkward if it wasn't so absurd. 2 guys who'd been dating the same girl, completely unaware of each other, sitting across from each other trying to figure out what the hell just happened. He showed me texts. I showed him texts. We compared timelines. There were nights she'd told me she was at her friend's place, but she was actually with him. There were weekends she'd told him she was visiting family, but she was actually with me. She'd been juggling schedules, making excuses, keeping everything compartmentalized. It was almost impressive in how calculated it was. I printed out the phone records and the text screenshots. Then I went to her apartment. She opened the door and immediately started apologizing for the dinner incident, saying she'd overreacted, that she loved me, that she wanted to work things out. I didn't say anything. I just handed her the printouts. Her face went white. She tried to say something, stumbled over her words, then just stopped. I asked her point blank if she'd been seeing someone else. She didn't answer. I asked again. She started crying, and then she admitted it. She said she'd met Derek at the gym, that it started as just talking, then coffee, then more. She said she didn't know what she wanted, that she was trying to figure out which relationship made her happier, that she was keeping both of us around as options until she decided. I stood there completely calm and asked her one question. Why did you accuse me of cheating first? She wiped her eyes and said, my therapist told me that guilty people often project. So I thought if I accused you first, you wouldn't suspect me. The sheer calculated coldness of that statement is still wild to me. She'd literally weaponized therapy language to cover her own tracks. She'd turned her guilt into my problem, made me defend myself against accusations she knew were false, all so she could buy herself more time to figure out which guy she wanted to keep. I told her we were done. She begged me to stay, said she'd end things with Derek, that she chose me. I asked her if she'd already told him that. She went quiet. I left, blocked her number, blocked her on everything. Then I sent Derek all the screenshots and a message letting him know she'd just tried to pick me over him. He replied an hour later saying he'd blocked her too. A couple weeks later, he texted me asking if I wanted to grab a drink. We ended up becoming friends, which is probably the weirdest outcome of the whole thing. We still laugh about it sometimes. Two guys who got played by the same person, bonding over the absurdity of it all. Last I heard, she's posting Instagram quotes about toxic men and how she's focusing on healing from manipulation. The irony is almost poetic. That story makes you wonder how many accusations are just confessions in disguise, doesn't it? But not every secret stays hidden behind phone records. Sometimes all it takes is one person finally deciding to tell the truth, even if it's at a wedding. My brother was getting married to the love of his life. At least, that's what everyone kept saying. They'd been together since college, one of those couples that made you believe in soulmates. She was kind, smart, came from a good family. The wedding was going to be huge. Destination venue, 200 guests, the whole fairy tale setup. My parents were thrilled. Everyone was thrilled. Except I knew something nobody else did. My brother had a son, a 4-year-old boy from a relationship he'd had right before he met his fiancée. It wasn't a secret to me because he'd told me about it years ago, sworn me to silence, and said he'd handle it when the time was right. He paid child support, sent money every month like clockwork. But he'd never met the kid, never told his fiancée, never even mentioned it to our parents. I asked him about it once, maybe 2 years into his relationship. I said, "You're getting serious with her. Don't you think she deserves to know?" He brushed it off, said it was complicated, said the timing wasn't right, said he'd tell her eventually, but not yet. Not when things were going so well. 5 years passed, still nothing. I started to think maybe he really would tell her. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment, some perfect opportunity where it wouldn't blow everything up. But the engagement came and went. The wedding planning started, venue booked, invitations sent, dress bought, and he still hadn't said a word. Then, the week before the wedding, I got a message. It was from his ex, the mother of his son. We'd never spoken before, but she'd found me on social media and reached out. She said she was struggling, money was tight, the kid was asking about his dad. She didn't know what to tell him anymore. She said she didn't want to ruin anything, but she needed help, and my brother had stopped responding to her messages. I didn't know what to do. This wasn't my mess, but it was about to become a whole lot messier if nobody did anything. I called my brother, told him we needed to talk. He knew immediately what it was about. He got defensive, said his ex was being dramatic, that he sent money, and that should be enough. I told him that wasn't the point. The point was that he was about to marry someone who had no idea he had a child. He said he'd handle it. I asked when. He said after the wedding, after the honeymoon, when things settled down. I told him that was insane, that he couldn't start a marriage with a lie that big, that she deserved to know before she signed a legal document tying herself to him. He got angry, said it wasn't my business, said if I told her I'd ruin everything, ruin his life, ruin the wedding, ruin his relationship with our parents. He begged me to stay quiet. Just one more week. Just let him get through the wedding, and he'd figure it out after. I thought about it. I really did. Part of me wanted to stay out of it, let him deal with his own consequences, but the other part of me kept thinking about her, about how she was walking into a marriage with someone who'd been lying to her for 5 years, about how if she found out later, after the wedding, after they'd started a life together, it would be so much worse. So I made a choice. The rehearsal dinner was at this beautiful restaurant overlooking the water. Both families were there. Everyone was laughing, toasting, talking about how perfect everything was. My brother looked happy. She looked happy. It would have been easy to just let it happen, but I couldn't. I waited until there was a lull in the conversation. Then I pulled her aside, told her I needed to talk to her privately. She looked confused but followed me outside to the patio. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her my brother had a son, that he'd had him before they met, that he'd been paying child support for years and had never told her. She stared at me, didn't say anything for a long time. Then she asked if I was joking. I told her I wasn't. I showed her the messages from his ex, showed her the dates. She just stood there, processing. And here's where it gets absurd. She walked back inside, straight up to my brother in front of everyone, and asked him point blank if it was true. The entire room went silent. My brother looked at me, then at her, then back at me. His face went pale. He tried to pull her aside, said they should talk privately. She refused, said he could answer the question right there or she was leaving. He admitted it, just like that. Said yes, he had a son. Said he'd been meaning to tell her but didn't know how. Said it didn't change how he felt about her. She asked how long he'd known. He said since before they met. She asked why he never told her. He didn't have an answer. Then came the breaking point. She took off her engagement ring and put it on the table. Said she couldn't marry someone who'd lied to her for 5 years. That if he could hide something that big, what else was he hiding? My brother tried to apologize, tried to explain, but she was done. She walked out. Her parents followed. Half the guests followed. My parents turned on me immediately. My mum started crying, asking how I could do this. My dad said I'd ruined everything, that I'd destroyed my brother's life, that I should have stayed out of it. My brother didn't even look at me. He just sat there, staring at the empty seat where his fiancée had been. The wedding was called off. Deposits lost. Guests notified. It was a disaster. My parents didn't speak to me for months, said I'd humiliated the family, that I'd chosen a stranger over my own brother. They uninvited me from family events, stopped calling. My brother blocked me on everything. As far as they were concerned, I was the villain in this story. The thing is, I didn't feel like the villain. A few weeks later, I got a message from her, his ex-fiancée. She thanked me, said she was angry at first, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized I'd done her a favor. She said she deserved to know the truth before legally tying herself to someone who could lie that easily. She said if he could hide a child for 5 years, what else would he hide in a marriage? She said she dodged a bullet. And honestly, I think she did. My brother still hasn't spoken to me. It's been over a year. My parents have slowly started coming around, but it's not the same. Family dinners are awkward. Holidays are tense. I'm still the person who ruined the wedding, the person who couldn't just mind their own business. But I don't regret it, because at the end of the day, she deserved to know. She deserved to make an informed choice about who she was marrying. And if that makes me the bad guy in my family's story, I can live with that. My brother made his choices. I just made sure she knew what those choices were before it was too late. Family secrets have a way of imploding at the worst possible moments. But workplace secrets, those have a paper trail that can bury someone alive. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw HR sitting in my boss's office. You don't get called into a meeting with both of them unless it's serious. And the look on his face told me this wasn't going to be a performance review. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He told me to sit down, closed the door, and said they'd received complaints about my conduct with a junior employee. Inappropriate conduct. I asked him what he was talking about. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said there had been multiple complaints, witnesses, a pattern of behavior that made people uncomfortable. I was completely blindsided. I asked who complained. He said he couldn't disclose that. I asked what specifically I was being accused of. He said it would all be outlined in the documentation. I looked at the HR rep. She wouldn't make eye contact. Just sat there with a folder in her lap, nodding along like this was routine. I asked for examples, dates, times, anything concrete. He waved his hand dismissively and said, "We'll discuss it in your exit interview. Not your next meeting, not your formal review. Your exit interview." He'd already decided I was gone. That's when I realized what was happening. This wasn't about misconduct. This was a setup. My boss had a history. He'd thrown other people under the bus before, blamed his mistakes on junior staff, pushed out anyone who questioned him. I'd watched him do it twice in the past year alone. Good people, gone overnight, with vague reasons and no real explanation. And now it was my turn. But here's the thing, I'd been preparing for this. For the past 6 months, I'd been BCCing myself on every single work email, every instruction he gave me, every project update, every conversation that happened over company channels. I didn't trust him. I'd seen how he operated. So I built a paper trail, just in case. I went home that day knowing I'd been fired, or at least knowing it was coming. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded, said I understood, and left. The HR rep looked almost relieved that I didn't push back. That should have been her first red flag. The second I got home, I opened my personal email and started searching through my archives. I had thousands of messages, every instruction, every directive, every poorly thought out plan he'd ever sent me, and I was looking for something specific, something I remembered but hadn't thought much about at the time. And there it was, an email from 4 months ago, subject line, junior staff retention. In it, my boss explicitly instructed me to build rapport with the junior employee he'd just accused me of misconduct with. He told me to check in with her regularly, make her feel valued, keep her engaged so she wouldn't quit. His exact words were, "We can't afford to lose her right now. Do whatever it takes to keep her happy." Then came the breaking point. I kept digging, found another email from 2 months ago where he complained about her work quality, told me to coach her privately because he didn't want to deal with it himself. Then another one where he asked me to take her to lunch to discuss her performance issues, off the record, so there wouldn't be any formal documentation. Every single thing he'd accused me of doing inappropriately, he had explicitly told me to do. In writing, with timestamps. But that wasn't even the best part. I found an email chain between him and another manager, where he was complaining about her filing an HR complaint against him. She'd reported him for micromanaging, creating a hostile work environment, making her feel undervalued. And in his response, he said, and I quote, "I need to get ahead of this before it becomes a problem. I'll handle it." He was trying to fire me to cover his own mismanagement. She'd filed a complaint about him, and instead of addressing it, he decided to create a scapegoat, pin everything on me, make it look like I was the problem, and walk away clean. The audacity of weaponizing his own instructions against me is genuinely unhinged. I didn't sleep that night. I organized everything, made a timeline, cross-referenced emails with dates, built a case so airtight there was no way anyone could ignore it. Then I drafted an email to his boss and corporate HR, attached every single relevant message, highlighted the key sections, added a brief summary explaining exactly what had happened. I sent it at 6 in the morning. Then I waited. By noon, I got a call from corporate HR, not the same rep who'd sat in the office nodding along, someone higher up. She asked if I could come in for a meeting the next day. I said yes. She thanked me for the documentation and told me not to discuss it with anyone in the office yet. The next day, I showed up and met with her and 2 other corporate representatives. They walked me through everything, asked clarifying questions, verified the emails were authentic. I could tell they were pissed, not at me, at him. Turns out the junior employee had filed her complaint about my boss 3 weeks earlier. He'd been stalling, trying to figure out how to make it go away. And his brilliant plan was to fabricate a misconduct case against me, fire me, and then tell her that the toxic influence in the department had been removed. Problem solved, right? Except he forgot that everything he'd ever told me to do was documented. Every instruction, every directive, every piece of evidence that proved he was lying. They fired him within 48 hours, didn't even give him the courtesy of an exit interview, just walked him out with security and told him his belongings would be mailed to him. The junior employee was told the truth. She thanked me later, said she felt horrible that I'd almost gotten dragged into it, but appreciated that I had the emails to back everything up. And then, about a week later, I got another call from corporate. They offered me his position, said they needed someone in leadership who actually documented things properly and didn't try to cover their tracks by destroying other people's careers. I accepted. The irony of getting his job after he tried to fire me is almost too perfect. I still have every email, backed up in 3 different places, because I learned a long time ago that people will lie, manipulate, and rewrite history to protect themselves. But emails don't lie, timestamps don't lie, and when someone hands you the rope, all you have to do is wait for them to tie the knot themselves. Last I heard, he's working some mid-level position at a company 2 states over. No leadership role, No authority, just a guy with a ruined reputation and a very well-documented history of trying to scapegoat his employees. And every time I sit at his old desk, I think about that smirk he gave me when he said we'd discuss it in my exit interview. He really thought he'd won. He really thought I'd just roll over and take it. Turns out, keeping receipts is the best revenge you can get. Sometimes the best defense is just keeping receipts. But not every betrayal happens at work. Some happen so close to home, you trip over the evidence. I was cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen, that one drawer every apartment has where random stuff just accumulates. Old receipts, dead batteries, takeout menus from places that probably closed 2 years ago. And that's when I found it. A third key to our apartment. I pulled it out and stared at it for a second, trying to figure out why we'd have an extra. We already had 2 keys, one for me, one for my partner. The landlord had given them to us when we signed the lease, so where did this one come from? I walked into the living room where my partner was watching TV and held it up. Hey, what's this key for? I kept my tone casual, not accusatory. Just curious. She barely glanced at it. Oh, that's the spare from the landlord. He gave it to us in case we ever locked ourselves out. It made sense, sort of. Except I distinctly remembered our landlord handing us exactly 2 keys on move-in day and saying those were the only copies he had. He'd even made a point of it, saying if we needed extras, we'd have to get them made ourselves. But maybe I was misremembering. It had been over a year. I dropped it back in the drawer and let it go, but something about her answer nagged at me. Not enough to make a big deal out of it, just enough to sit in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't quite reach. A week later, I had to fly out for a work conference. It was supposed to be a 4-day trip, but the last day got cancelled, so I caught an earlier flight home. I didn't tell my partner. It was a surprise. I figured I'd pick up dinner on the way, come home early. Maybe we'd actually have a nice evening together for once. I got to the apartment around 6 in the evening. I could hear voices inside as I walked up to the door. I figured she had a friend over, maybe watching a movie or something. No big deal. I unlocked the door as quietly as I could, not trying to be sneaky, just didn't want to interrupt if they were mid-conversation. And that's when I saw him. Some guy I'd never seen before in my life was sitting on my couch, drinking one of my beers, feet up on my coffee table, watching my TV like he lived there. My partner was in the kitchen getting snacks. She turned around, saw me standing in the doorway, and her face went completely pale. The guy looked over confused. Oh, hey man, you must be the roommate. Roommate? He called me the roommate. I looked at my partner. She was frozen, mouth open, clearly trying to come up with something to say. I looked back at the guy. He was just sitting there, casual as anything, like this was completely normal. How did you get in? I asked him, keeping my voice calm. He pointed at my partner. She let me in. I've been crashing here when she's free. And here's where it gets absurd. I asked my partner directly. Who is this? She stammered for a second, then said, He's just a friend. We hang out sometimes. I pointed at the beer in his hand. In our apartment, drinking my beer, while I'm out of town. She tried to pivot. It's not like that. We just watch movies and talk. It's completely innocent. I turned to the guy. How long have you been coming here? He shrugged. I don't know, couple months? She said her roommate travels for work a lot, so the place is empty. Figured it was cool. Couple. Months. I felt that weird calm that comes over you when something is so surreal, your brain just stops processing emotion and switches to autopilot. I looked at my partner and asked the only question that mattered. How did he get a key? Silence. The guy, bless him, had no idea what he'd just walked into. He genuinely thought this was a roommate situation. He thought I was some platonic person who lived there and happened to be gone a lot. She'd been telling him we were roommates, that we weren't together, that the apartment was just as much hers as mine, so she could have whoever she wanted over. But that wasn't even the worst part. I asked her point blank if she'd been letting him stay over every time I traveled. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I asked if he'd been sleeping on the couch or in the bed. Her eyes darted away. The guy looked uncomfortable now, finally realizing something was very wrong. Wait, he said. Are you two actually together? I nodded. He stood up immediately, set the beer down, and backed away from the couch like it was on fire. Dude, I had no idea. She told me you were just her roommate. I swear I wouldn't have. I believed him. I could see it in his face. He was just as blindsided as I was. I told him he needed to leave. He grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. My partner tried to follow him, tried to explain, but he was already gone. Then it was just the two of us. She started with the excuses immediately. He was just a friend. They never did anything. She just liked having company when I was gone because the apartment felt too empty. She didn't think it was a big deal. I was overreacting. I asked her again, "Where did he get a key?" She finally admitted it. She'd gotten a copy made, gave it to him so he could come and go when I wasn't around. She said it was easier than having to let him in every time. The calculated nature of that blew my mind. She didn't just invite him over once. She gave him a key. She planned it. She set up a whole system where he could come and go freely while I was out of town, and she told him I was just a roommate so he wouldn't ask questions. I asked her why. Why go through all that trouble? Why not just break up with me if she wanted to see other people? She said, and I quote, "I didn't want to lose the apartment." Not me. The apartment. She liked the place. She liked the rent. She liked the location. And breaking up with me would have meant finding somewhere else to live. So instead, she just kept me around for stability and brought someone else in when I wasn't there. The sheer audacity is still unbelievable. I told her to get out. She tried to argue, said she lived there too, that she had just as much right to stay as I did. I reminded her that my name was the only one on the lease. She'd moved in later, never signed anything, never paid rent directly. Technically, she was a guest, and I was done hosting. She packed a bag and left, but not before texting me an hour later calling me dramatic, saying I was blowing everything out of proportion, that I should have just talked to her instead of kicking her out, that I was being controlling and unreasonable. I changed the locks that night, called a locksmith, paid extra for emergency service, had every lock in the apartment replaced by midnight. Then I blocked her number. The guy surprisingly messaged me the next day. He apologized profusely, said he felt like an idiot for not seeing the signs, that he should have questioned why she never wanted to hang out at his place, why she always insisted on hers. He genuinely had no idea I existed beyond being some random roommate. We ended up talking for a bit. He seemed like a decent person who got used just like I did. I kept the apartment. She kept the lies. Last I heard, she moved in with someone else a month later. I wonder if they know she's already had a key made for someone on the side. It's wild how people rewrite reality to fit their story. But when your best friend starts giving you helpful relationship advice, maybe check whose side she's really on. I started noticing the articles around 3 months before everything fell apart. My best friend Sarah kept sending me links, BuzzFeed listicles, Psychology Today pieces, Reddit threads, all about cheating, signs your partner is lying, how to spot emotional affairs, why men pull away when they're hiding something. At first, I thought it was random, just something she'd seen and figured she'd share. But then it kept happening. Every few days, another article, another warning sign, another red flag checklist. I'd mentioned to her a few weeks earlier that my boyfriend had been acting a little distant. Nothing major. He was stressed with work, spending more time at the office, coming home tired, normal relationship stuff. But Sarah latched onto it, started asking questions. Was he on his phone more? Was he being secretive? Had his schedule changed? I told her she was overthinking it, that everything was fine. She said she just wanted to make sure I wasn't being naive, that she'd seen too many friends get blindsided by cheating and didn't want that to happen to me. I appreciated it. Genuinely, I thought she was just looking out for me. Then she offered to help. She said she could try to get closer to him, befriend him, see if he'd let anything slip, maybe flirt a little, see if he'd take the bait, test his loyalty. She framed it like she was doing me a favor, like she was going undercover to protect me. I laughed it off at first, told her that was unnecessary. But she insisted, said it would give me peace of mind, that if he was faithful, great. If he wasn't, I'd know before I wasted more time on him. Looking back, the audacity is kind of impressive. I didn't take her up on the offer, told her I trusted him and didn't need to test him like that. She backed off, but she kept sending the articles, kept asking how things were going, kept reminding me to watch for signs. And here's where it gets absurd. My boyfriend's cousin reached out to me one night. We weren't super close, but we followed each other on social media and had met a few times at family stuff. She sent me a message that just said, "I think you need to see this." Attached were 3 photos, my boyfriend and Sarah sitting at a restaurant 2 towns over, holding hands across the table, leaning in close. One of them showed him kissing her cheek. I stared at my phone for a solid 10 minutes, trying to process what I was looking at. It didn't make sense. Sarah was my best friend. She'd been warning me about cheaters. She'd offered to help me catch him if he was being unfaithful. Why would she be the one he was cheating with? I called her immediately. She answered on the third ring, all casual, like nothing was wrong. I asked her where she was. She said she was at home. I asked if she'd been out earlier. She said no, just watching Netflix. I told her I had photos of her with my boyfriend. There was a long silence. Then she started crying. She said it just happened, that she didn't mean for it to go that way, that she'd been trying to get close to him to investigate like she'd offered, and somewhere along the line, feelings developed. She said she'd been trying to figure out how to tell me, that she felt terrible, that she never wanted to hurt me. I asked her how long it had been going on. She said a few weeks. I asked her to be honest. She admitted it had been a couple months. Then came the breaking point. I asked her if she'd been sending me those articles to cover her own guilt, if she'd been projecting her betrayal onto him so I'd be too busy worrying about him to notice what she was doing. She didn't answer, just kept crying, kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't know how it happened. I told her we were done, hung up, blocked her number. Then I called him. He didn't even try to deny it, just sighed and said, "So you know." I asked him how long. He said 3 months. 3 months. While she was sending me articles about cheating. While she was pretending to be concerned. While she was offering to investigate him. I asked him how it started. He said she'd reached out to him. Said she wanted to get to know him better since we were so close. They started texting, then meeting up for coffee. Then it turned into more. He said she'd told him I was emotionally unavailable, that I didn't appreciate him, that she understood him in ways I didn't. Classic stuff, the kind of thing people say to justify doing something they know is wrong. I asked if he felt guilty. He said he did, but that he'd fallen for her. That it wasn't just physical, that they had a real connection. I told him to have a great life with her and hung up. The fallout was messy. Mutual friends found out. Some took my side. Some stayed neutral. A few actually sided with them, said that feelings are complicated and people can't help who they fall for. Those people got cut off too. Sarah tried to reach out a few times, sent long apology texts, said she never meant to hurt me, that she hoped one day I'd forgive her, that our friendship meant everything to her. The irony of that last part still gets me. They're still together now. I see them sometimes on social media through mutual friends' posts. They look happy. Good for them, I guess. I lost a boyfriend and a best friend in the same week. But honestly, I gained something more valuable. Clarity. The kind you only get when someone shows you exactly who they are. Because here's the thing. Anyone who warns you about wolves while wearing the fur themselves is the actual danger. Sarah spent months pointing me toward threats that didn't exist while she was the one betraying me the whole time. She weaponized my trust, turned my insecurities into a smokescreen for her own lies. And my boyfriend? He let her, participated in it, played along while she pretended to be my friend. I don't miss either of them. I miss the versions of them I thought existed. But those people were never real. I was just too close to see it. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. The over-concern, the constant warnings, the offer to test him. She wasn't protecting me. She was protecting herself, building a narrative where if I ever found out, she could say she was conflicted, that she tried to resist, that it just happened despite her best efforts. It didn't just happen. She pursued him, manipulated both of us, and when she got caught, she cried and played the victim. The thing that bothers me most isn't even the betrayal itself. It's the calculation behind it. The months of lies, the articles, the fake concern. The effort she put into making me think she was on my side while she was actively working against me. That takes a special kind of person. I'm doing better now. New friends, new perspective. I'm more careful about who I trust. I pay attention to actions instead of words. And I've learned that sometimes the people warning you the loudest about danger are the ones you should be watching closest. Projection is a hell of a drug, isn't it? But sometimes the truth doesn't come from a friend's warning. Sometimes it comes from something as simple as a noise complaint. My upstairs neighbor was obsessed with noise. Not normal noise complaints like loud music at 2 in the morning or parties on weeknights. I'm talking about complaining when I vacuumed at 3 in the afternoon, when I did dishes, when I walked across my own apartment in socks. The first time he came down to complain, I thought maybe I'd genuinely been too loud. It was a Saturday morning around 10, and I'd been playing music while I cleaned. Not blasting it, just normal background volume. He pounded on my door so hard I thought something was on fire. When I opened it, he was standing there in pajamas, face red, telling me I was being inconsiderate and he had a right to peace and quiet in his own home. I apologized, turned the music down, and thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. He complained about my footsteps, said I walked too heavily. I started wearing slippers, thinking maybe my shoes were the issue. He complained about those too, said he could still hear me moving around. I asked him what he wanted me to do. Levitate? He didn't think that was funny. Then he started complaining about things that didn't even make sense. My coffee maker, my shower, the sound of my chair scraping against the floor when I stood up from my desk. He'd bang on the floor with something, maybe a broom handle, whenever I made any noise at all. It got to the point where I was walking on eggshells in my own apartment, terrified to do anything that might set him off. I started documenting everything, kept a log with timestamps of when I was doing normal activities and when he'd complain. Vacuuming at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, doing laundry at noon on a Sunday, washing dishes at 7 in the evening, all completely reasonable times. I figured if he ever escalated to the landlord, I'd have proof that I wasn't being unreasonable. But here's the thing, it wasn't just the complaints, it was the way he acted. Paranoid, jumpy, like he was always waiting for something to go wrong. I'd see him in the hallway sometimes and he'd avoid eye contact, hurry past me like I was a threat. Other neighbors mentioned he did the same to them, and his wife. I'd seen her maybe twice in the 8 months I'd lived there. She'd show up for a weekend, then disappear for weeks. I figured they had some kind of long-distance situation, or maybe she traveled for work. I didn't think much of it. Until one night when he came down to complain again. It was a Thursday evening around 8. I'd been watching TV at a normal volume. He pounded on the door, started his usual rant about how I had no respect for other people, how he was going to report me, how I was making his life miserable, and I just snapped. I said, "Why don't you spend more time at your other apartment if this one's so unbearable?" It was sarcasm, pure sarcasm. I was just trying to shut him up, throw back something ridiculous because his complaints were ridiculous. But the second the words left my mouth, his entire face changed, went completely pale. He stammered something, backed away, and went upstairs without another word. That's when everything unraveled. I mentioned the weird interaction to another neighbor the next day. She laughed and said he probably did have another apartment somewhere, given how little his wife was around. We joked about it, but then she started actually looking into it. Social media, public records, that kind of thing. And she found something. He had another address, in another state, under the same name, but with a different woman listed as a co-owner. Same last name, not his sister, not a business partner, another wife. At first, we thought maybe it was a mistake. Public records get things wrong sometimes. But then other neighbors got involved, started digging deeper, found social media profiles, photos of him with 2 different families, 2 different sets of kids, 2 completely separate lives running parallel to each other, hundreds of miles apart. The guy wasn't just noise sensitive, he was paranoid we'd figure out what he was hiding. Things went from bad to unhinged when someone decided to do something about it. I don't know who. Maybe the neighbor who'd done the initial digging, maybe someone else in the building. But one of the wives got a message, a Facebook message with screenshots, photos, addresses, everything. She didn't believe it at first, apparently, thought it was a scam or a jealous ex trying to cause trouble, but she reached out to the other wife to confirm. They connected, compared notes, realized they'd both been married to the same man for over a decade. He'd been splitting his time between 2 states, 2 homes, 2 entire families, telling one wife he traveled for work, telling the other the same thing, 2 mortgages, 2 sets of kids who had no idea they had half-siblings, 2 women who thought they had a faithful husband. Both filed for divorce within days of each other, coordinated it even, made sure he got served with both sets of papers on the same day. The fallout was spectacular. He moved out of our building within a month, didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't even try to explain himself. Just packed up and left in the middle of the night like he was fleeing a crime scene. The apartment sat empty for a while before someone new moved in. The new tenant is quiet, doesn't complain about noise, doesn't bang on the floor when I vacuum. It's almost eerie how peaceful it is now. The whole thing is still surreal to me. I made a sarcastic comment, a throwaway line meant to shut him up, and accidentally stumbled into the truth. He wasn't worried about noise, he was worried about exposure. Every time someone knocked on his door, every time a neighbor tried to make conversation, he probably thought his whole double life was about to come crashing down. And in the end, it did. Just not the way he expected. Karma's louder than my vacuum ever was. Double lives have a way of crashing down when you least expect it. But nothing collapses quite like a party built on a lie, especially when the truth shows up uninvited. My sister had been planning this gender reveal party for weeks, and I mean planning. She had a Pinterest board with like 200 pins, custom balloons, a free tier cake, a photographer, the whole setup. It was going to be Instagram perfect. Her fiancé was over the moon. They'd been together for about 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and this baby was supposed to be the next chapter in their fairy tale story. The day of the party, everything looked amazing. The backyard was decorated like something out of a magazine. Pink and blue everything, a giant balloon arch, tables full of food, family, friends, co-workers, everyone showed up. My sister was glowing, her fiancé had his arm around her the whole time, and everyone kept congratulating them. It was the kind of event where you could feel the happiness in the air. We were about halfway through right before the big reveal when someone knocked on the front door. I was near the entrance, so I went to answer it. There was a guy standing there I'd never seen before, mid-30s, nice enough looking, holding a gift bag with baby stuff in it. He smiled and asked if he was late. I told him the party was just getting started and let him in, assuming he was a friend of my sister's fiancé or maybe a co-worker I hadn't met yet. He walked into the backyard. I watched him scan the crowd and then his eyes landed on my sister. She looked up at the same time and her face went completely white, like all the blood just drained out. Her fiancé noticed and asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. Just stared at this guy. The guy walked over, still smiling, and said, "Hey, I saw the party on your story. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I didn't want to miss it." Her fiancé looked confused, asked who he was. The guy looked even more confused and said, "I'm Ryan, the father." And here's where it gets absurd. The entire backyard went silent. You could hear the music playing in the background, but nobody was talking. Everyone was just staring. My sister tried to laugh it off, said there must be some kind of misunderstanding, that he had the wrong person. But Ryan pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages. He showed her fiancé text conversations between him and my sister, date nights, romantic messages, pictures of them together, and then the kicker, messages from a few weeks ago where she told him she was pregnant and that he was the father. Her fiancé's face went from confused to devastated in about 3 seconds. He looked at my sister and asked if it was true. She tried to deny it, said Ryan was lying, that he was some creep who'd been stalking her. But Ryan had receipts, months of receipts, dates that overlapped with her relationship with her fiancé, photos with timestamps, everything. My sister's fiancé asked her point blank how long she'd been seeing both of them. She didn't answer, just stood there crying. Ryan looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He asked her if she was engaged. She still didn't answer. He saw the ring on her finger and put it together himself. Then came the breaking point. Her fiancé asked whose baby it was. My sister said she didn't know, that she'd planned to do a paternity test after the baby was born and figure it out then. She said it so casually, like it was a totally normal thing to do, like she was going to just ghost whichever guy turned out not to be the father and pretend none of it ever happened. Ryan asked if she was serious. She snapped at him, said he shouldn't have shown up uninvited. He said he saw the party on her public Instagram story and thought he was supposed to be there, that she'd told him he was the father and he wanted to be involved. Her fiancé took off his jacket, handed it to someone, and walked out. Just left. My sister tried to follow him, but he told her not to, told her to stay away from him. She came back to the party in tears, and by that point people were already leaving. Nobody wanted to be there anymore. The photographer was packing up. The cake sat untouched. The whole thing fell apart in under 10 minutes. My parents tried to do damage control. My mum pulled my sister inside and tried to calm her down. My dad was apologizing to guests as they left, saying there'd been a misunderstanding, but there was no misunderstanding. Everyone had seen exactly what happened. Ryan left too, didn't say anything else, just put the gift bag on a table and walked out. I felt bad for him, honestly. He'd shown up thinking he was going to be part of this big celebration, and instead found out he'd been lied to for months. The engagement ended that night. Her fiancé texted her later saying he was done, that he couldn't trust her, that he didn't even know who she was anymore. He moved out of their apartment within a week. My sister tried to get him to talk to her, sent him long messages, showed up at his work, but he wouldn't budge. He was done. The really wild part, my sister still blames Ryan. Not herself, not her lies, not the fact that she was actively seeing two men and let both of them think they were the only one. She blames Ryan for showing up and ruining her day. She says if he'd just minded his business and waited for her to contact him, none of this would have happened. The lack of accountability is genuinely staggering. My parents tried to smooth things over with her fiancé's family, sent apology messages, tried to explain that my sister was just confused and scared. But his family wanted nothing to do with us. Can't say I blame them. Their son had just found out his fiancée was pregnant, possibly with another man's baby, and had been planning to lie about it for the rest of their lives. My sister eventually had the baby. It was Ryan's. She told him and he stepped up, said he wanted to be involved even though he didn't trust her anymore. They're co-parenting now, but it's messy. She keeps trying to get back together with him. He keeps shutting it down. Her ex-fiancé moved on. Last I heard, he's seeing someone new and doing well. My sister saw it on social media and spent an entire day posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and how men can't handle strong women. The irony of her calling anyone else a betrayer is almost poetic. The gender reveal party decorations stayed up in my parents' backyard for a week because nobody had the energy to take them down. Every time I saw those balloons, I thought about how perfectly everything had been planned, how picture perfect it all looked, and how it only took one person walking through the door to make the whole illusion collapse. My sister still doesn't get it. She still thinks she's the victim, that everyone overreacted, that if people had just given her time, she would have figured it out and everything would have been fine. But you can't build a life on lies and expect it to hold up. Eventually, someone shows up with receipts, and when they do, the whole thing comes crashing down. Some people really believe they're the victim in their own mess, don't they? But files don't lie, and sometimes one shared folder can torch an entire relationship. My partner and I had a shared Google Drive. Nothing fancy, just the boring adult stuff. Scanned copies of our lease, utility bills, insurance documents, that kind of thing. We'd set it up when we moved in together to keep everything organized in one place. It was convenient, practical, the kind of thing responsible couples do. One evening, I was looking for our renter's insurance policy because I needed to update my car registration. I opened the drive and started clicking through folders. That's when I saw one I didn't recognize. It wasn't labeled like the others, just a random string of letters and numbers like a default folder name you'd get if you didn't bother renaming it. I almost skipped over it. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it. Inside were dozens of files, documents, screenshots, photos. I opened the first one. It was a saved conversation from Tinder. Not an old one from before we met. A recent one, from 3 weeks ago. I checked the timestamp twice to make sure I was reading it right. I opened another file, more messages, different person, same time frame, then another, and another, all recent, all explicit, all from dating apps I didn't even know she still had on her phone. Then I found the photos, explicit images she'd sent to other people, not random strangers, people she'd been actively talking to, people she'd been making plans with. But that wasn't even the worst part. There was a spreadsheet, an actual spreadsheet, with names, dates, ratings, notes. She'd ranked people, gave them scores out of 10, wrote little comments about their jobs, their looks, whether they seemed serious or just fun. It was organized, color-coded. She'd put effort into this. I sat there staring at the screen, scrolling through folder after folder. Each one labeled with a different person's name, each one full of conversations, plans, photos. Some of the messages were from that same week, that same day even. While I'd been at work, while I'd been sitting on the couch next to her watching TV, she'd been actively messaging other people, setting up dates, sending photos. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was systematic, methodical. She'd built an entire system for cheating, and she'd stored it all in a shared drive that I had access to. The arrogance of thinking I'd never stumble across it is genuinely wild. I didn't even know what to feel at first. Anger, hurt, confusion, all of it just kind of blurred together into this numb disbelief. I took screenshots of everything, every conversation, every photo, every entry in that spreadsheet. Then I closed my laptop and waited for her to come home. She walked in around 8, cheerful, asking what I wanted for dinner. I told her to sit down. She looked confused but sat. I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. "What's this?" I asked. Her face went pale. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked at me. And the first thing she said wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was, "I didn't think you'd ever look." That was her defense. Not remorse, not guilt. Just surprise that she'd been caught. I asked her how long this had been going on. She said a few months. I asked her why. She shrugged and said she was keeping options open in case we didn't work out. Like I was a backup plan. Like our entire relationship was just a placeholder while she shopped around for something better. I asked her why she didn't just break up with me if she wasn't happy. She said, and I'm quoting here, "I didn't want to lose stability." Stability. She wanted to keep the apartment, the shared bills, the routine, the safety net of a relationship, while actively pursuing other people behind my back. She wanted all the benefits of being in a committed relationship without any of the actual commitment. And here's where it gets absurd. She tried to downplay it, said it wasn't cheating because she hadn't actually met up with anyone, just talked to them, flirted, sent some photos, made some plans that she probably wouldn't have followed through with anyway. She made it sound like I was overreacting, like I was being unreasonable for being upset that she'd been maintaining active profiles on multiple dating apps, sending explicit photos to strangers, and literally rating people in a spreadsheet. I asked her about the folders, the organization, the spreadsheet. She got defensive, said it was just a way to keep track of conversations, that it didn't mean anything, that I was reading too much into it. I pointed at the screen. You ranked them. You wrote notes. You organized them by name. She didn't have an answer for that. I told her to pack her things. She looked shocked, like she genuinely didn't expect consequences. She asked where she was supposed to go. I told her that wasn't my problem anymore. She said I was being dramatic, that we should talk about this like adults, that couples work through things. I asked her if she thought organizing a cheating operation in a shared Google Drive was working through things. She didn't respond. She packed a bag and left, stayed with a friend that night. I changed all the passwords to everything, removed her access from the drive, the streaming accounts, everything. Then I started the process of getting her name off the lease. She texted me the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. For weeks I got messages asking why I was overreacting, saying she'd made a mistake but we could fix it, saying I was throwing away a good relationship over something that didn't even happen. I never responded. What was there to say? She'd made her choices. She'd been making them for months, and the only reason she was upset now was because she got caught. Not because she felt bad, not because she realized she'd hurt me, but because her safety net was gone. The level of delusion required to maintain an entire cheating system and then act confused when it blows up is honestly impressive. A mutual friend reached out to me a few weeks later, said my ex had been telling people I'd broken up with her out of nowhere, that I'd been controlling and paranoid, that I'd gone through her private files without permission. She'd flipped the entire narrative, made herself the victim, conveniently left out the part where she'd been actively cheating and got caught. I sent the friend a few screenshots, just enough to give context. They stopped defending her pretty quickly. I kept the apartment, started over, deleted the shared drive entirely. I don't share passwords anymore. I don't share accounts. I learned my lesson. People will do whatever they think they can get away with. And some of them are dumb enough to document it in a place you have access to. The audacity of people who get caught and still play victim never ceases to amaze me. But sometimes it's not a file that exposes the lie. Sometimes it's a voice from the past. I was helping my mom set up her new phone. She'd finally upgraded after years of holding on to the same old flip phone, and she had no idea how to transfer anything over. Contacts, photos, the works. I'd been sitting at her kitchen table for about an hour, walking her through everything, when I noticed she had a voicemail notification from her old phone that had somehow carried over. She said she didn't know how to check it. I showed her where the voicemail app was, and she handed the phone back to me, said I could delete whatever was there since it was probably old anyway. I opened it up. There was one message from 2003. I don't know why I played it. Curiosity, maybe. Or just the oddness of a voicemail sitting untouched for over 2 decades. But I hit play, and a man's voice came through the speaker. Calm, sad, unfamiliar. He said, "I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. I hope she understands someday. Tell her I love her." That was it. 10 seconds, then it ended. I looked at my mum, asked her who it was. She stared at the phone like it had just materialized out of thin air. Her face went pale. She reached for it, took it from my hand, and listened to the message herself. Then she set it down on the table and didn't say anything for a long time. I asked again. She said it was nobody. I told her that didn't make sense. The message was clearly meant for someone. Someone named her. She tried to change the subject, said it was probably a wrong number, that she didn't remember, but her hands were shaking. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I pressed, told her I wasn't leaving until she explained. She started crying, not the kind of crying you do when you're sad, the kind you do when something you've been holding on to for years is finally about to break open. She told me to sit down. I was already sitting, but I didn't argue. And then she said it. The uncle I'd been told died before I was born wasn't my uncle. He was my biological father. I sat there trying to process what she'd just said. She kept talking, filling the silence with explanations I didn't ask for. She'd had an affair, got pregnant with me. The man I'd called Dad my whole life, the one who raised me, who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, wasn't genetically mine. She said she'd made a choice. She'd chosen to stay in her marriage, to keep the family together, and that meant cutting my biological father out completely. He'd wanted to be involved, wanted to meet me, wanted to be part of my life, but she'd told him no. Told him it would be too complicated, that it would destroy everything. The voicemail was from my first birthday. He'd called to say he wished he could be there, that he hoped one day I'd understand, that he loved me. 6 months later, he died in a car accident. And here's where it gets absurd. I asked her why she never told me, why she let me grow up thinking my dad was my dad, my family was my family, my history was my history. She said she didn't want to confuse me, didn't want to hurt anyone, didn't want to ruin the life she'd built. I asked if Dad knew, the man who raised me, if he'd known the whole time. She nodded. I left her house without saying another word, drove straight to my dad's place. He was in the garage working on something, and when he saw my face, he knew. He just knew. I asked him if it was true. He put down whatever tool he was holding and said yes. He'd always known, from the beginning. My mom had told him when she found out she was pregnant, and he'd made the decision to stay, to raise me as his own, to never tell me the truth. I asked him why. He said because I was his daughter. Biology didn't change that. He didn't see the point in complicating things when, as far as he was concerned, I was his kid, and that was the end of it. Part of me understood. Part of me wanted to scream. But that wasn't even the worst part. I started looking into my biological father, asked my mum for his name. She didn't want to tell me at first, but eventually she did. I found obituaries, old social media profiles from family members, photos. He looked like me. Same nose, same eyes, same smile. It was like looking at a version of myself I'd never known existed. I found out he'd never married, never had other kids. I was it, and he'd spent my entire first year of life trying to be part of it, only to be shut out. Then he was gone. I found some of his family, cousins and aunt, reached out to them. They didn't know I existed. My mom had kept me a secret from them too. When I told them who I was, they were shocked, said he'd mentioned a daughter once, but they thought he'd been confused or mistaken since he was never married and never brought anyone around. They sent me more photos, stories, told me what kind of person he was, kind, funny, worked as a teacher, loved music, would have done anything to know me, and I'll never get to know him. The weight of that realization still hits me sometimes. I had a whole other parent out there who wanted me, who tried, who loved me from a distance and then just disappeared. And I spent 33 years not knowing he existed. I don't talk to my mum anymore. I can't. Every time I think about reaching out, I remember that voicemail. I remember that she had the power to let me know him and chose not to. She chose her comfort over my right to know where I came from. My dad, the one who raised me, and I are okay. It took time. A lot of conversations, a lot of processing, but at the end of the day, he's still my dad. He's the one who was there, the one who showed up, and that counts for something. But there's a hole now, a gap where a whole other person should have been. A man whose voice I finally heard after 3 decades, saying he loved me, and I never got the chance to say it back. I listen to that voicemail sometimes. My mum never asked for the phone back, and I never offered. It's the only piece of him I have. 10 seconds of audio from over 20 years ago, and it's all I'll ever get. The hardest part is knowing it didn't have to be this way. He didn't abandon me. He didn't choose to be absent. He was erased, written out of my story before I even knew there was a story to tell. And now I'm left holding a voicemail and a lifetime of what-ifs. Some secrets stay buried until technology digs them up. But other times, someone just accidentally texts the wrong person and your whole world unravels. I was sitting on the couch watching TV when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text said, "Hey babe, running late tonight, don't wait up." I stared at it for a second, then typed back, "Wrong number." There was a pause, then, "Oh shit, sorry man." I almost left it at that. Just some guy who texted the wrong person. Happens all the time. But then something in my brain clicked. My wife had told me that morning she'd be working late. Said she had a big project deadline and wouldn't be home until after 10. It was 7:30. I texted back, "Who is this?" Another pause. Then, "Just a coworker of your wife's. My bad, dude." My stomach dropped. I asked which coworker. No response. I called my wife. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. I texted her asking where she was. No answer. I grabbed my keys and drove to her office. It's about 15 minutes from our house. The parking lot was almost empty. Her car wasn't there. I checked the visitor spots, the back lot, everywhere. Nothing. I sat in my car and texted the guy again. "Where are you two, really?" My phone rang immediately. It was him. He sounded panicked, talking fast, saying he thought I knew, that my wife had told him I was cool with it, that we had some kind of arrangement. I asked him what arrangement. He said an open marriage, that my wife told him I didn't care what she did as long as she was discreet, that they'd been seeing each other for 8 months. 8 months. I didn't say anything for a second, just let that number sink in. He kept talking, apologizing, saying he never would have gotten involved if he'd known I wasn't aware. He sounded genuine, like he actually believed what my wife had told him. I asked him to repeat everything, told him I was recording. He hesitated, then said he understood and repeated it all. How they met at a work conference, how she pursued him, how she explicitly told him I knew and didn't mind, how they'd been meeting up 2 or 3 times a week for months. The level of deception required to pull that off is honestly kind of impressive, in the worst way possible. I thanked him for being honest and hung up. Then I sat in that parking lot for another hour, just processing. My wife of 6 years had been cheating on me for 8 months, told her affair partner we had an open marriage, lied to both of us. And I only found out because he sent a text to the wrong number. She got home around midnight, walked in smiling, asked how my day was, said her project meeting ran long. I asked where her car was. She said she'd parked it at the office and got a ride home from a coworker because she was too tired to drive. I asked which coworker. She said a woman from her department. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, panic, anger, then this weird, forced calm. She tried to say he was lying, that he'd been obsessed with her for months, hitting on her, making her uncomfortable, that he must have gotten my number somehow and was trying to ruin her life because she'd rejected him. I asked why he knew so many specific details about our life, about our house, our schedules, things only someone close to her would know. She said he probably stalked her social media. I reminded her that her profiles were private. She said he must have found a way. I told her I was done, that I didn't believe her, that I was filing for divorce. She started crying, begging me to listen, saying it wasn't what it looked like. I asked her to explain what it looked like then. She couldn't, but that wasn't even the worst part. The next morning, the guy texted me again, said he felt terrible, that he'd been lied to just like I had. He sent me screenshots, months of messages between them, hotel receipts, photos, everything. He said he wanted me to have evidence in case I needed it for the divorce. I thanked him and saved everything. Then I called a lawyer. The divorce was brutal. She tried to fight for half of everything, said she deserved it because she'd supported me through grad school, because she'd sacrificed her career for mine. All things that were technically true, but felt hollow given the circumstances. Her lawyer tried to paint me as controlling, said I was punishing her for having friends, that I was jealous and paranoid. My lawyer presented the messages, the recordings, the hotel receipts with dates and times that matched nights she'd told me she was working late. Her story fell apart pretty quickly after that. The guy even offered to testify if needed, said he felt responsible for not questioning my wife's story earlier. I told him he didn't need to do that, but I appreciated it. He seemed like a decent person who got manipulated just like I did. The court wasn't sympathetic to my wife. The affair, the lies, the evidence, it all added up. I got the house. She got some savings and her car. She tried to argue it was unfair, that she deserved more. The judge wasn't interested. She moved out within a month, didn't say goodbye, just took her stuff while I was at work and left the keys on the counter. I came home to an empty closet and a note saying she hoped I was happy. Happy wasn't the word I'd use. Relieved, maybe. Vindicated. Glad to be out of a relationship built on lies. The guy and I don't talk anymore, but he sent me one last message a few weeks after everything was finalized. Said he was sorry for his part in it, that he'd learned a hard lesson about taking people at their word. I told him not to beat himself up, that my wife was good at lying, good enough to fool both of us. I still think about that first text sometimes, how a simple wrong number unraveled 8 months of lies, how if he'd double-checked the contact before sending it, I might still be in the dark, how something so small can expose something so big. My wife tried to reach out a few times after the divorce, sent messages saying she made a mistake, that she wanted to work things out, that we could get past this. I blocked her. There's no getting past 8 months of calculated deception. No coming back from that level of betrayal. I'm doing better now. Sold the house eventually. Too many memories. Started over somewhere new. It took a while, but I'm in a better place. And I learned a valuable lesson. Trust your gut. When something feels off, it probably is. A wrong number can topple a house of cards faster than anything. But sometimes the betrayal isn't romantic. Sometimes it's professional, and way more satisfying to destroy. I spent 6 months on that campaign. 6 months of late nights, revisions, client calls, research, strategy meetings. It was my project from the ground up. My coworker Jessica was assigned to help, but her contributions were minimal at best. A few comments here and there, some surface-level feedback, but nothing substantial. I didn't mind. I liked the work. I wanted it to be good. Presentation day came. The entire leadership team was in the room. My boss, the VP, a few department heads. This was the big moment. The campaign was solid and I knew it. I'd rehearsed my talking points, prepared slides, had everything ready to go. And then Jessica stood up. She walked to the front of the room, opened the presentation, and started talking. Talking about my work, my research, my strategy, my ideas. She presented everything like it was hers, used first person. I developed this approach. I identified this gap in the market. I structured the campaign around these pillars. I sat there completely frozen. I kept waiting for her to acknowledge me, to say we instead of I, to give even the smallest nod to the fact that I'd done the actual work. But she didn't. She just kept going, slide after slide, taking full credit for everything. When she finished, my boss stood up and congratulated her, said it was excellent work, that she'd really stepped up. The VP nodded along, said he was impressed. Jessica smiled, thanked them, and sat down. I finally found my voice. I said, "Actually, I worked on this too. We collaborated." Jessica jumped in immediately. "Oh, of course, we collaborated. It was a team effort." She said it in that dismissive tone that made it sound like I'd contributed some minor details, like I was trying to insert myself into her success. My boss nodded, said teamwork was great, and moved on to the next agenda item. The meeting ended. Jessica got handshakes and praise. I got nothing. After everyone left, I pulled her aside, asked her what the hell that was. She laughed, actually laughed, and then she said, "You're too soft to fight for credit. That's on you." She walked away like it was nothing, like she'd just given me a life lesson instead of stealing 6 months of my work. Big mistake. Here's the thing. I record all our team meetings. I started doing it months ago for note-taking purposes. I'm terrible at remembering details in the moment. So I record everything and go back through it later to pull out action items and key points. It's completely legal in my state. One-party consent. As long as I'm part of the conversation, I can record it. And I had hours of audio. Meetings where Jessica admitted she didn't understand the project. Conversations where I walked her through every single detail. Moments where she literally said, "I'll just let you handle this. You're better at it anyway." Planning sessions where she contributed nothing and I outlined the entire strategy myself. I went home that night and started pulling clips, organized them by date, added timestamps, built a timeline that showed exactly who did what. Then I wrote an email to HR, kept it professional, explained the situation, attached the audio files, sent it. HR responded within a day. Said they were opening an investigation. They called me in for a meeting, asked me to walk through everything. I brought printed transcripts of the recordings, highlighted the key sections, showed them exactly where Jessica had misrepresented her involvement. They asked if I had any other documentation. I showed them the project files. Every draft had my name on the edit history. Every email about the campaign had come from me. Every client interaction had been handled by me. Jessica's name appeared maybe 3 times in 6 months, and all of her contributions were surface-level comments that didn't change anything. But that wasn't even the worst part. During the investigation, HR found out she'd done this before, at her last job, took credit for a junior employee's work, got promoted off it, and left before anyone connected the dots. It was in her reference notes, buried in a vague comment about collaboration challenges. The hiring manager had glossed over it, but now, with my complaint, it painted a clear pattern. They fired her within a week. She didn't even get to finish out a notice period, just walked out the same day with security. I found out later she'd tried to argue her case, said the recordings were invasive, that I'd violated her privacy. But HR shut it down. The recordings were legal, the evidence was clear, and her history made it indefensible. My boss called me into his office the day after she was let go. He apologized, said he should have asked more questions during the presentation, that he'd taken her word at face value and that was his mistake. He admitted he'd been impressed by her initiative and hadn't thought to verify who'd actually done the work. Then he told me Jessica's promotion had been approved the week before, a senior role with a significant raise, and since she was gone, he was offering it to me instead. I took it, obviously. The funny part? A few months later, Jessica tried to connect with me on LinkedIn, sent a generic request with no message, just clicked the button like we were casual acquaintances who'd parted on good terms. I stared at that request for a solid minute, trying to figure out what was going through her head. Did she think I'd forgotten? Did she think enough time had passed that it didn't matter? Or did she just not care, figured it was worth a shot to add me to her network in case it ever benefited her down the line? I declined. Didn't send a message, didn't explain, just clicked decline and moved on. The whole experience taught me something valuable. People like Jessica exist everywhere. They're good at talking, good at positioning themselves, good at taking just enough credit that it's hard to call them out without looking petty. They rely on other people being too polite, too passive, too afraid of conflict to fight back. But documentation doesn't care about politeness. Evidence doesn't care about optics. And when you have proof, you don't need to fight. You just present the facts and let them speak for themselves. I still record meetings. I still keep detailed notes. I still save every email and every draft. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I learned that protecting your work is just as important as doing it well. And if someone ever tries to pull that again, I'll be ready. Never underestimate someone who documents everything, but proof doesn't always come from recordings. Sometimes it's just a story that doesn't add up. My 8-year-old daughter came home from school upset. She said her teacher had yelled at her for no reason and made her sit in the hallway during recess while the other kids played outside. I asked her what she'd done to deserve that. She said nothing. Just asked to use the bathroom. I'll be honest, my first thought was that she was exaggerating. Kids do that. They tell you their version of events and leave out the part where they were talking during quiet time or didn't follow directions, so I didn't make a big deal out of it. Told her to be more careful, listen to her teacher, and try to have a better day tomorrow. But she wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting she hadn't done anything wrong, that her teacher had just gotten mad at her for asking a question, that it wasn't fair. I figured I'd email the teacher just to get her side of the story, keep it simple, non-confrontational, just a quick check-in to see what had happened. I sent a polite message asking if there had been an incident that day and if there was anything I should know about. The teacher responded the next morning, said my daughter had been disruptive and disrespectful in class, that she'd been warned multiple times and had chosen not to listen, that the hallway time was a consequence for her behavior. I asked for specifics. What exactly had she done? What had she said? When had this happened? The response was vague, just repeated that she'd been disruptive, that she'd interrupted the lesson, that other students had been distracted by her behavior. I wasn't satisfied. I asked if we could set up a meeting to discuss it in person. The teacher agreed and we scheduled something for the following week. Then she cancelled, said something came up. We rescheduled. She cancelled again. That's when I started to get suspicious. I went into the parent portal to check my daughter's behavior records. All year she'd had perfect marks, no issues, no warnings, no incidents. Then suddenly last week, there were multiple infractions logged. Disruptive behavior, disrespect, failure to follow instructions, all on the same day. It didn't add up. My daughter wasn't perfect, but she wasn't a problem kid. Her previous teachers had never had issues with her. Her report cards were good, and now, out of nowhere, she was getting written up multiple times in a single day. I decided to dig deeper. Our school district has a policy that allows parents to request security footage if there's a dispute about student behavior. I'd never used it before, didn't even know it existed until I went looking. But I filled out the form, submitted it, and waited. It took about a week. Then I got an email saying the footage was ready for review. I went to the school, sat in the principal's office, and watched the clip they'd pulled. And here's where it gets absurd. My daughter had been sitting at her desk, hand raised, waiting to be called on. The teacher ignored her for a few minutes, kept teaching. My daughter put her hand down, then raised it again. Finally, the teacher called on her. My daughter asked if she could use the bathroom. The teacher snapped, told her she should have gone during break. My daughter said she didn't have to go then. The teacher raised her voice, said she was being disruptive, and needed to leave the classroom. My daughter looked confused, picked up her things, and walked out into the hallway. That was it. That was the entire incident. No disrespect, no disruption. Just a kid who needed to use the bathroom and got yelled at for asking. I sat there staring at the screen, replaying it in my head. My daughter had been telling the truth the whole time, and I doubted her. I asked the principal if I could see the behavior report the teacher had filed. She pulled it up. It said my daughter had repeatedly interrupted the lesson, refused to follow instructions, and had been argumentative when corrected. None of that had happened. The teacher had just lied. I filed a formal complaint right there, showed the principal the footage, showed her the report, pointed out the clear discrepancy. The principal said she'd look into it. I told her that wasn't good enough. I wanted the teacher removed from my daughter's classroom immediately. She said she couldn't do that without an investigation. I said, fine, investigate. But my daughter wasn't going back to that class until it was resolved. The principal agreed to move my daughter to a different classroom temporarily while they looked into it. Then she said something that made my blood pressure spike even higher. She said other parents had made similar complaints about this teacher, that she'd been flagged before for being too harsh with students, but there'd never been proof. Just parents saying their kids were scared of her or that she'd been unfair. And without evidence, there wasn't much the school could do. But that wasn't even the worst part. I asked why the teacher was still in a classroom if multiple parents had raised concerns. The principal said the teacher had been with the district for 15 years, that she had tenure, that unless there was concrete evidence of wrongdoing, they couldn't just remove her. So basically, my daughter, and who knows how many other kids, had been dealing with a teacher who yelled at them, lied about them, and faced zero consequences because no one had been able to prove it until now. The teacher was suspended pending investigation. I got a call a few days later saying they'd reviewed more footage from the past few weeks and found other incidents where she'd behaved similarly with other students, snapping at kids for minor things, writing them up for infractions that didn't match what actually happened. She was placed on administrative leave. I don't know if she'll be fired or just reassigned, but at least she's not in a classroom right now. My daughter's behavior reports were expunged from her record. The principal apologized, said they should have taken the earlier complaints more seriously. I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change the fact that my kid had spent a week thinking she was in trouble for something she didn't do, that she'd come home upset and I'd basically told her to deal with it because I assumed she was exaggerating. I sat down with her that night and apologized, told her I should have believed her from the start. She said it was okay, that she understood, but I could tell it had shaken her. She'd learned that adults don't always tell the truth, that sometimes the people in charge lie, and that even when you're right, you might not be believed. That's a heavy lesson for an 8-year-old. Other parents reached out to me once word got around, thanked me for pushing back, said their kids had complained about the same teacher, but they'd brushed it off, assumed their kids were being dramatic. One mum said her son had started faking sick to avoid going to school because he was so scared of that teacher. It's wild how much power one person can have over kids and how little oversight there is until something finally breaks. My daughter's doing better now. She likes her new teacher. She's not scared to go to school anymore, but I watch her more carefully now. Listen closer when she tells me something's wrong, because I learned the hard way that kids aren't always dramatic. Sometimes adults are just liars. Kids aren't always dramatic. Sometimes adults are just liars. And speaking of liars, the next story involves a betrayal so close to home, it literally came from inside the house. I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text said, "Can't wait to see you tonight. He's working late again, right?" I stared at it for a second, confused. I replied, "Wrong person." They texted back immediately. "Oh, sorry. Thought this was Mike." Mike was my roommate. We'd been living together for about a year and a half. Cool guy, or so I thought. We got along fine. Split bills evenly, never had any major issues. But the message stuck with me. "He's working late again, right?" I work late every Thursday. It's been my schedule for the past 6 months. Same shift, same time, every week. And tonight was Thursday. Something felt off. I scrolled through Mike's Instagram, started looking at who was commenting on his posts, who was liking everything. Found a girl who showed up constantly. Every post, every story, always one of the first to react. Her profile was public. I clicked through her photos, and there, buried a few weeks back, was a picture of her and Mike at a restaurant. The caption said something generic about good company and great food, but they looked close, too close for just friends. I messaged her, kept it simple, asked how she knew Mike. She responded pretty quickly, said they'd been seeing each other for a few months. Then she asked if I was his brother. His brother. I told her no, I was his roommate. She went quiet for a minute. Then she asked if Mike lived with his brother. I said no, just me. She sent back a confused emoji and said Mike had told her his roommate's brother crashed on the couch sometimes because he was going through a rough time. That's when it clicked. I asked her if Mike had ever mentioned a girlfriend. She said no. I asked if she'd ever been to our apartment. She said once, but only briefly, and Mike said his roommate wasn't home much because of work. I asked what nights she usually came over. She said Thursdays because that's when Mike said the apartment was empty. My stomach dropped. I asked her to describe Mike's roommate's brother. The guy who supposedly crashed on the couch. She described me, my height, my build, even mentioned the jacket I always left on the back of the couch. She'd seen me, multiple times probably, and Mike had told her I was someone else entirely. I thanked her for the information and told her she might want to ask Mike some questions. Then I called my girlfriend, asked her what she was doing that night. She said she was staying in, probably watching a movie. I asked if she wanted to come over. She hesitated, then said she was tired and would just stay at her place. I told her I'd stop by after work. She tried to talk me out of it, said she wasn't feeling great and just wanted to rest. I insisted. She finally agreed. I left work early, drove straight to my apartment. Her car was parked 2 blocks away. I recognized it immediately. She always parked there when she visited because the street parking near my building was terrible. I walked up to my apartment and unlocked the door as quietly as I could. Heard voices inside. Laughter. I walked into the living room. My girlfriend and Mike were on the couch, not just sitting, together. The kind of together that made it very clear what had been going on. They both froze when they saw me. My girlfriend scrambled to fix her shirt. Mike stood up, hands out like he was trying to calm down a wild animal. Started saying my name, saying he could explain. I asked how long. He didn't answer. I asked again. My girlfriend started crying, said it just happened, that it didn't mean anything. I looked at Mike, asked him how many Thursdays. He admitted it had been a few months. Every week I worked late. They'd been meeting up in my apartment, on my couch, in my space. And here's where it gets absurd. Mike tried to justify it, said he was going to tell me eventually, that he didn't know how to bring it up, that it started as just talking and evolved into something more. My girlfriend jumped in, said Mike had pursued her, that he'd been flirting for weeks before anything happened, that she'd tried to resist, but he kept pushing. Mike's face changed. He said that wasn't true, that she'd initiated it. They started arguing with each other right in front of me about whose fault it was, like I wasn't even standing there, like the betrayal itself wasn't the issue, just who got blamed for it. I told them both to get out. My girlfriend tried to argue, said we should talk, that we could work through this. I told her there was nothing to work through, that she'd been sleeping with my roommate in my apartment on a schedule built around my work shifts. There was no coming back from that. Mike started packing his stuff, didn't say much, just grabbed clothes, his laptop, some personal items. My girlfriend kept trying to talk to me, saying she made a mistake, that she loved me, that Mike had manipulated her. I didn't respond, just held the door open until they both left. She tried to reconcile for weeks after, texted me paragraphs about how sorry she was, how it was a mistake, how she'd do anything to fix it. I blocked her number, blocked her on everything. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. I wanted zero contact. Mike tried to apologize a few months later, sent me a long message on an old email account I barely used. I saw the subject line, didn't even open it, just deleted it. Some betrayals don't deserve closure. They don't deserve explanations or apologies or any kind of resolution. They just deserve to be cut off completely. I found a new roommate within a month, a friend of a friend who needed a place and had solid references. We set clear boundaries from day one. No overnight guests without advance notice. No lending out keys. Basic respect for shared space. The girl who'd accidentally texted me reached out one more time, thanked me for telling her the truth, said she'd confronted Mike and he'd admitted everything. She'd ended things immediately. We didn't stay in touch after that, but I appreciated her letting me know. Looking back, the whole thing was so calculated. Mike knew my schedule, knew exactly when I'd be gone. Coordinated with my girlfriend to make sure they had the apartment to themselves, and they would have kept going if that text hadn't come through to the wrong number. One message, one little mistake, and the whole thing unraveled. I don't talk to either of them anymore. Don't check their social media. Don't ask mutual friends about them. They're just gone from my life, and that's exactly how I want it. The apartment feels different now. Better, honestly. No tension. No wondering what's happening when I'm not around. Just a clean space with someone I can trust. And I learned something valuable. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't wait for apologies. Don't hope for change. Just move on and build something better without them. When the betrayal is in your own home, there's nowhere left to feel safe. But at least in the next story, the liar got what was coming thanks to one tiny mistake. My cousin called me one afternoon asking if she could borrow some money. Said her car had broken down and she needed $5,000 for repairs. It was a lot, but we were close. I'd known her my whole life. We'd grown up together, spent holidays together, trusted each other. So I said yes. I transferred the money through a payment app. She sent me a message right after that said, "Thank you so much for the loan. I'll pay you back next month." I screenshotted it out of habit, not because I didn't trust her, just because I like keeping records of financial stuff. Then I moved on with my life. Months went by. She didn't pay me back. I wasn't stressed about it. I figured she was still dealing with whatever had come up. I didn't push. Didn't bring it up at family events, just let it sit. Then Thanksgiving rolled around. I got a text from my aunt saying I wasn't welcome at dinner this year. I was confused, asked her why. She said my cousin had told the family I'd stolen money from her, that I'd broken into her apartment and taken cash while she was out of town. I read that message 3 times trying to make sense of it. Stolen money? Broken in? I called my aunt. She didn't pick up. I called my mom. She sounded disappointed, said she didn't want to believe it, but my cousin had been really upset. And why would she lie about something like that? I tried to explain, told her I'd loaned my cousin money, that I had proof, that this was insane. My mom said my cousin had been crying, that she seemed genuinely hurt, and that maybe I was misremembering. Like I'd just forgotten breaking into someone's apartment. I called my cousin directly. She didn't answer. I texted her. No response. I found out later she told the whole family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, painted this whole picture of me as someone who'd betrayed her trust, stolen from her, violated her home. People I'd known my entire life were looking at me like I was a criminal. And here's where it gets absurd. I was sitting at home, furious, trying to figure out how to prove I hadn't done something I obviously hadn't done, when I remembered the transfer. I opened the app, pulled up the transaction, and there it was. $5,000 sent to my cousin on the exact date she'd asked for it, with a timestamp and a message from her thanking me for the loan. I took screenshots. Then I opened the family group chat and posted them. Didn't add much commentary, just wrote, "Here's proof of the loan she's now calling theft," and attached the images. The chat went silent. No one responded for hours. Then my aunt called me, privately. She apologized, said she should have asked more questions before jumping to conclusions. Then she told me something I hadn't known. My cousin had a gambling problem, had for a while. The family had been trying to keep it quiet, hoping she'd get it under control. She'd blown through the $5,000 I'd loaned her at a casino within a week. Then she'd panicked, started spiraling, and instead of coming clean, she decided to accuse me of stealing to cover her tracks. The absolute audacity of turning your own mess into someone else's crime is genuinely staggering. My aunt said my cousin was struggling and didn't mean it. I asked if she'd apologized yet. My aunt said no, but that she was embarrassed and needed time. I said I didn't care if she was embarrassed. She tried to destroy my reputation to hide her own problems. My mum called next, also apologized, said she should have believed me from the start. I appreciated it, but the damage was done. Everyone had been so quick to believe I was capable of something like that. No one had questioned my cousin's story. No one had asked for proof. They'd just taken her word and shut me out. Thanksgiving came and went. I wasn't re-invited. My aunt said it would be awkward and that my cousin wasn't ready to see me yet. I told her that was fine. I didn't want to sit at a table with people who'd believed I was a thief without even asking my side. My cousin never apologized, not directly. I heard through family members that she felt bad, that she knew she'd messed up, that she was working on herself, but she never actually said any of that to me. Never acknowledged what she'd done, never tried to make it right. I didn't get the money back either. My aunt hinted that I should let it go since my cousin was dealing with a lot. I said I'd let it go when she paid me back, or at least admitted she lied. Neither happened, but everyone knows the truth now. The family group chat screenshots made sure of that. My cousin can't rewrite the story anymore. She can't play the victim. The timestamps don't lie. The message doesn't lie. And no amount of tears or excuses can change what actually happened. I've kept my distance since then, still go to some family events. But I don't go out of my way. I'm polite, civil. But the trust is gone. Not just with my cousin, but with the relatives who were so ready to believe the worst about me. It's a strange feeling, realizing that people you've known your whole life will turn on you that quickly, that they'll believe a dramatic story over the quiet truth, that they'll choose comfort over confrontation, even when it means throwing you under the bus. But I learned something valuable. Keep records, screenshot everything, save receipts, because when someone tries to rewrite history, the only thing that matters is proof. And I had it. I didn't get my money back. I didn't get a real apology. But I got my name cleared. And sometimes that's enough. And that's where we'll close tonight's collection of chaos. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, the truth always has receipts, even when the liars think they've covered their tracks. If these stories taught us anything, it's that secrets don't stay buried forever. And sometimes the smallest mistake exposes the biggest lie. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're officially part of the drama-loving family. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me which story hit hardest, and I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well, or don't. Your call.